Welcome. I am Patty.
And I'm Jackie, and together we are Grow Live, where we answer your farm and garden questions. We are here to help others grow a healthier world, one question at a time, one gardener at a time. Our goal is to help you be successful in growing healthier food and creating a healthier planet.
Yes. And so how you doing today, Jackie?
I'm rocking today, Patty.
Woo-hoo.
How about you?
So excited. I'm pretty good, really. Yeah, for what is it? End of January. We haven't even got to February yet. So what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about gardeners' cabin fever in February, and I think everybody can relate to this. People have been asking questions about when can we start our seeds? Some people start them too early, other people wait too late.
Yes. Well, let's find some answers to those hounding problems.
Okay, questions. Question number 1. Lots of people do not know how many seeds to start, or even which ones do you start indoors? I absolutely get this question a lot.
Yeah, this is a problem, right? Because people start the wrong things, and then pretty soon we're growing like crazy the wrong stuff. So let's try to figure some of that out here.
It's a huge learning curve.
Yes. Oh, and look what I did this morning, Jackie. I went out to the refrigerator really, and made me some juice out of my carrots from last year. So this reminded me that I gotta take some of this really good. Reminded me that I need to plant more carrot seed this year, but we don't do that inside. We do that outside. So.
And are those apples?
Yes, those are apples from my apple tree. Yes. And I harvested them a little green because I can't grow Granny Smith, but I want a green apple. So I harvested them a little before they were ready. And now they're a tart apple. They're great for juice.
So you have those stored somewhere? Those are your apples from your...
Yeah, they're just in my refrigerator. Yeah. So what can a gardener do in February? Wow, people are talking about planting seeds, and we want to get ready to plant seeds. And then we're going to do some checking the germinations on the seeds. We're going to give you a supply list and set up to plant some seeds very soon. I can guarantee it.
It'll be here.
Look at this. I went out to the passive solar greenhouse, and look, this is what's out there. Now, I can't say that it's growing. I can say they are alive. And I am going to be eating them, I hope, in March. So
they'll start to grow again in March once you get.
Yeah, you see the little crown of the plant. They will be growing. They're just kind of setting their living. They're not doing a lot of photosynthesis. We just don't have enough sun right now, so that's causing us the grief, right?
Lori says, are those mustards?
Those are Chinese cabbage. So a purple and a green Chinese cabbage. And I thought, I planted these, I think in August, late August. I thought I was going to be harvesting them in October, but the sun told me otherwise. So this is what we're thinking about, green growing plants, right? This is in the passive solar too. It is green and growing, and it's exciting.
That's kale, right?
We're thinking about this, but this is what's going on. Okay, so we have the February moon. The Native Americans call it the hunger moon, and there is good reason for it, right? There is nothing growing, and our supplies are running short, like my carrots. So what are we going to do about it? Because these gardeners, wow, have they got garden fever. I could see on the internet already people are going crazy. I'm in this big group on Facebook, and they are growing seeds already all over the place. But that needs to stay in the southern hemisphere and not ours, right? Because we need to think about, when am I going to plant this transplant that I'm planting inside, outside, into the garden? Because our frost dates control that. So I'm in growing zone 3, and they keep trying to move it toward a 4. and others in the state are in 4, growing zone 4. And we're in the 49th parallel, to give some other people ideas of where we're at coming from. So we got to think about this. The 1st of June, before we can plant any tomatoes or green stuff, warm season stuff. So soil temperature is going to control that. Our daylight hours and stuff all help with that. So that's all going to have to be taken into consideration. Now, as we move from one environment to another, they all change, right? So it's going to be different for the greenhouse, different for the high tunnel, different for the garden. So, but let's figure out how we're going to get ready to plant these seeds. So first, we did this last week, right? I think everybody's got their seeds already in hand and ready to go. Now, this is important, that we start with the right type of soil. So, and we need to get it dampened and ready to go. So we don't want to plant in dry soil. That makes for a very negative experience. So here's some ideas of my recommended soils. I do a soilless planting media to start plants in, and for pots. And I want to include mycorrhizal in it. So here's an example of one that I found on the internet, and I have bought Pro Mix before. Usually buy that at a really, really big garden center. But you can see the mycorrhizal in there. This is fungi that's going to help our plants grow. This one is my mainstay. It's one I use all the time. I just picked it up at my local hardware on sale this winter. And this is another one. I think this one is actually part of the Montana products. This is what I get for the gardens and greenhouses, right? So these are the big bulk. And this one is coming out of Montana too, because we try to buy as local as we possibly can. This is coming out of Flathead Lake at Peak Cove. So, but we need to read the label before we buy, because we do not want to have a water saver product in it, right? That water saver type product is like adding the little pellets in a diaper to your soil, right? And they're not going to break down in the environment. They're horrible in the environment. We got to take this soil to the environment at some point, at some time. We don't want that stuff. So, sounds good. Don't go for it. Next, back to compost. So let's find some compost tea. It can be dry powder that you buy, or if you have it, like I said, I put some in the root cellar, so I made sure I had some for this event. And then I always add worm castings to it. We have worm castings available here in Montana down by Billings at Shepherd that you could buy in bulk if you are a bigger grower. And of course, I love buying local. So that's where I've gotten all my worm starts from, is from the local supplier. Don't forget your labels. Oh my gosh, we have to have labels on these seeds. I don't know how many times I've messed that up, and I work with students at the school. Oh, between them and I, we can really mess this thing up. Do we have any questions pertaining to any plants or what are some?
There was a question about when's the best time to start tomatoes?
Yeah, we're back to this frost-free date, right? That you can find on the USDA's website, and there's different places to figure it out. But I know mine is the 1st of June before I can plant outdoors. Now, as the weather's been changing the last 10 years, can I been able to fudge on that? Sure, I have been able to fudge on that. Do I want to risk them all? No. I will put some out and risk it maybe if I want to really stretch it and I know the soil temperature is warm. But if I'm not that ready to gamble and lose all my plants, I don't put them out until the 1st of June. This is outdoors in the garden. In the high tunnel, they can go out mid-May, maybe earlier if you're willing to cover inside the cover in the greenhouse, in the high tunnels. In a heated greenhouse, whole different ballgame, right? In a greenhouse that you're willing to go put a heater out there, it changes everything. So I want to remind you why we want the worm castings and the compost extracts or the compost tea is this seedling, see it? It germinated. These are the radicals coming out. Super exciting. That germinated so fast that you could almost see the thing growing. This is it a few days later. And this is a different example, but these are beans. This one didn't get it, and this one did. So that soil you're buying from the store with the fungi in it, the mycorrhizal, is going to help you do this versus this. So that's why I want to remind you to look for that when you buy your product for your soil. What else? What other questions we got, Jackie?
That picture said it all. That photo is worth 20,000 words, Patti. Wow. Should I start all of my seeds at one time?
Absolutely not. You see these little dudes? Those are radishes. And this is befriend. And those are warm or cold season crops. They come up really fast. They can tolerate frost. They can tolerate the cold. In fact, most of them, kind of like kale, they just laugh at it, right? So those get planted differently. In fact, we'll talk about them in a second because some of them we're going to start just for sprouts and not take them on to maturity. Yes.
Is that indoor or outdoor?
This is in the Sleeping Buffalo greenhouse, but I have a same bed makeup in my high tunnel that does the same thing, just different planting date to get them to do this. In between here, I think is carrots or something, a longer season crop, because these are going to leave and then we'll put something else in. So what we'll start right away here, which right away is the end of February. For me, it's probably going to be first part of March before I even start eggplants, tomatoes, celery. I even think Brussels sprouts probably. I'm going to start that early. But the other stuff is going to stagger as we come along, as needed, right? Because these guys, these cool season crops grow super fast. Like if I put in my cabbages with my tomatoes in the inside, they would outgrow their pots. They'd need transplanted. Every time they do, they go through transplant shock and they're stressed. And you would be better off to plant the cabbage seed in the soil out in the garden than to start it too early in the inside. So that's why we want to keep a journal and some records, figure out when it worked and when it didn't work. Last year, I worked with another grower and she grew indoors. She had a beautiful light setup. And so she was able to grow a lot of that stuff, but some of it we started too early. Some of it I started too late. So just kind of depends. So that gets us back to this growing light situation. So most people try to grow right in the south window, which I like the south window. I put my growing lights in the south window, right? And I have to have some. My friend is highly successful doing it in a dark basement. So depends on your lights, and there's other videos online that you can find as to what lights to be buying. I use LEDs. Make sure that I can adjust them up and down. Just see how tall these plants have gotten here. That light needs to be high here and it still needs to be low here. So you need to be able to move those lights up and down as the plants need them. Okay, so next we got to locate here is some plant cells and trays. And I like these kind, and you see other people use peat pots and stuff. That's really, it's all a personal preference. When I first started greenhouse work, these were 6 packs. This is what we call a cell, a 4-cell. They were 6-cell when I started. Well, and they figured out, well, that's not enough soil in that area for this one plug to take off and go and do what you want it to do. So I use these 4s. And I'm mostly using these like for the indoor starts, right? I call them plugs. And so a tomato, I might start a tomato in here. Say I start a brandywine in here. It's going to be a big plant. And within a month, it's going to need transplanted out of this and into the next bigger size plant or cell. So we'll talk about that in a second. But you want to have these trays. One tray has holes in it and the other does not. The spotted one doesn't have any holes in it. This one goes on top of that one. These go on top of that. And then you can water from the bottom, or if you have excess water, then it's going in this tray and you can drain it off and not let your plant sit in excess water. And those are called tray liners when you look for them to find those. So here's a lot of pots that I've used in the past. I had these given to me. Would never do that again, right? These are nursery pots, and I probably wouldn't even go that way anymore, but I like them where they're round. They're not round. They need to be square. Oh, my X is on the wrong one. There we go. This X should be over here. Okay, so the round wastes you a lot of space because every round there's got all this space in between. That's a lot of air space, causes the roots to dry out, and it's space that I could have been growing a plant in. So stay with squares. There we go. And I try not to go too tiny. I think this is a 4.5, or what they call a 2.5. This is a 4, that's a 5. I like a tall 4. It's a taller and skinnier. Gets the roots really deep and long, like especially like on a tomato, or tall a trailing nasturtium. They work really good. Oh, I forgot to add a picture. So we got to be ready to transplant up for these tomatoes, and probably the Brussels sprouts will need to be transplanted up if we're going to start them early. So we're going to go from this cell to this one, or right to this one. And like a tomato loves this transplant move. A lot of other plants hate it. So you got to kind of know your plant. Like a cabbage doesn't really appreciate it. Some plants just don't handle it well, like your squashes. They don't handle it well. So I start a squash in this size and take it right to the garden. Where a tomato I start in here, and every time I transplant it, it gets this new surge of growth and new surge of roots that can feed the plant more nutrients. And so that's why I like the tall 4-inch or tall 6 for the tomatoes. Okay, I think we're getting close to checking off these things of what we need for our list to start. Have you got seeds? Are they all in just a big box, or where do you got them in, Jackie? So I like to organize them. That's okay. What do you got your seeds in?
We have a whole cabinet full of boxes and containers.
Yeah, I used to too, and I'm not a very organized person, so I decided to move toward upcycling the lettuce containers that I've been buying lettuce in greens in the winter, and I upscale them, and so then I just label them and use them. I'll show you one of those in a minute. So, but I like to organize them into early. That's early that I'm going to plant indoors, later spring. Those would be like our cabbages. And then the ones I'm going to plant directly in the ground. So I might end up with 4 different.
I did that last year too.
Yeah, it was a big help, because then when I want to go out and plant something, say it's peas and it's the early stuff that's going to go in the ground, I've got it in one container, and I get out there and I'm like, oh, I wanted a few radishes too. Now I got to go back inside, try to find the radishes. So try to group those together. Woohoo, Jackie, we're getting close. You got anything more?
And it's good to take an inventory. Mike and I, last weekend we went through, took an inventory, and then we did the seed order immediately after the inventory. And last year I did go through and I broke them all up into pretty much those 3 piles. What's before the first frost date, what's after frost date, what gets transplanted, and what gets direct seeded. Yep, same thing. What's our question? What's the best soil to use to start my seeds with?
I think we just did that on our planning media.
Most people do not have a heated greenhouse to start seeds in. What do they need to know in order to get set up to grow indoors?
Yep. And so we just talked about that. Just make sure they're LED lights, and the LEDs need to be for growing plants. So there's lots of websites or YouTubes on how to do that online. So just make sure they're LEDs.
Okay, I think we have one more. I do not have any compost thawed out. Is there a product that I can buy to use as a seed treatment?
Yeah, I've been researching that. I watched some podcasts last week, and there's a really good one, looks like, out of the West Coast, and I'll put a link to it in our show notes. So remember, we got to ask ourselves, when are we going to plant this thing outside? So how long do we want to babysit these things? So like, I used to not plant anything until the state FFA convention was over, period.
The what?
The state FFA convention, because I had to be at it for my job. I was gone for 3 or 4 days in a row. My plants would have crashed if I had planted them 3 or 4 days in a row, and I was gone. So you got to think, how long do I want to babysit these guys, and am I going to be here for the duration to do the babysitting? So you got to think about some of those things. I love planting arugula, and so got to think, when's it going in? And these are sun-loving plants. They're not going to. These are the ones we're going to start soon, which is.
When do you put your arugula in, though?
In the ground is in the high tunnel or the greenhouse as soon as soil's thawed out. Arugula and radishes can go in, kale, broccoli, all that stuff could go as soon as the soil's thawed out. So that's going to be you monitoring it and figure that out yourself. So when that can happen.
You know what? I went through our journal and I was surprised. In 14 years, Mike's start date was between April 7th and April 14th, almost, or out of 20-something year. I have all the way back to 1993, and I went through, and almost every year, except for a few outliers like late March, early May, almost every year it was April 7th to April 14th.
Yeah.
And then his date after first frost was June 4th. Our anniversary is June 5th.
Yeah.
But it was June 4th.
Yeah,
like I was surprised at how much all that data helped us know now with certainty.
Yeah, and it takes away some of this reaction. Like, we have a hot, warm week for a week. Hey, yeah, let's go plant tomatoes, because I don't know how many people lose them when that happens. And sometimes the greenhouse suppliers don't have extra tomatoes to restock, and let's try not to do that. So look at that celery. I juiced all this and put it into ice cube trays, and now I just pull out one whenever I want it. Okay, so here's some of the cool seasons. Like we just talked about, they can go in relatively quickly. Now, I did plant some of these last fall. I think I showed you that in a picture last week. In a hot house, inside a cold frame inside the high tunnel, and they're up. They're not growing. They're kind of like that Chinese cabbage, but they will be shortly. So those guys.
Did we read those? Kale, cilantro, greens, just for our audio listeners.
What's that?
Did we read those for audio listeners? That it says kale, cilantro, and greens. If they don't have access, we got to make sure we read. Plant indoors to grow greenhouse or cold frame. Kale, cilantro, green.
Yeah, and in that picture I showed earlier, which that won't help them, but that's what was up and growing, So super fast. And what to do with these older seeds, right? I got some really old seeds. So I've been taking them out, do germination tests on them. I like to test 10 seeds in a wet paper towel, fold them up, not super tight, leave them with some air, and put them in a bag, and then put them in a warm, dark place. I don't have a warm, dark place in my house, so I put them on a register in a small room and put a towel over the top of them. And I think they're going to germinate really fast that way. You don't have to go through the expense of buying a heat pad or whatever, but you do want to figure out, are these guys still alive or not? I think the germination, and it says right on the package somewhere, It's going to say germination. And I think this one was like 95%, but that was in 2015, right? So now I got to be thinking, oh, maybe not all of those are alive. So when you pull these out and open them up next week or in 3 days, whenever they're going to germ, and then you can count them, well, 8 of them are alive, then my germination rate now is 80%. So when I go plant them in the ground or out in the garden, I'm going to have to plant 20% extra seeds to get the same planting rate. So we got to think about some of that.
Mike does that too.
Yeah. And so for those of you that really got cabin fever, which there's a lot of us, we make seed tapes. Last year I put together a workshop and we had, I don't know, a dozen people show up and we made seed tapes. Paper towel. We cut the paper towel in half. So we end up with these little checks, so then we can tear them off however long our row is without disturbing the plant tape. Did all my carrots that way, and we'll be making some tapes for carrots here as I have nothing else to do in February because I'm not planting seeds for plants yet with that. So we'll make some seed tapes.
And do you just use flour and water for glue?
Yep. Yeah. So we want to try to get you guys ready for next week.
We're getting our hands dirty, starting sprouts and ordering fruit trees?
Yeah. Can you hardly wait? So, but before we can plant those sprouts, you got to...
Oh my God, so ready.
Yeah. So we got to locate some seeds. I'm going to go with sunflower seeds and some peas. You can go with anything that we just talked about, the kales, broccoli, radishes, even wheat, whatever your fancy is, because these guys are going to come up fast. We're going to eat them. We're not going to be taking care of them for long periods of time. We're just going to be eating them. So we're going to be learning and sprouting some seeds to make sprouts, and then which trees to kind of locate and give you some questions and answers on that. Isn't that gorgeous?
Is that a pear tree?
That is an American plum. American plum, native bush from Montana. And
white flowers.
Yeah, it is my rock star to draw in the bees and to take care of the native bees, right? We see a honeybee in here, but there's native bees all throughout this bush too. And so their life cycle starts with that tree. So,
oh my gosh, I made a plum salsa this year that was so delicious. It was just, so good. I made 2 batches. Wait, go back. Just really quick. So you're saying people who come to our Grow Live next week should bring a handful of seeds to try. They're going to sprout their own seeds?
Yep, some seeds. Those planting trays.
Sunflowers?
What's that?
Are those bird seed sunflowers?
Yeah, I'm going on the cheap side. They are.
Oh, they're my favorite. That's all I'm planning. Like I'm going to plant.
You do want to germinate these because I've put them in for sprouts before and had zero come up. So maybe 1 or 2 out of hundreds of seeds. So they do need to be germ tested, right? Because sometimes those growers are doing weird stuff to that stuff. And then any pea, green pea, yellow field peas and green peas are super cheap to go buy them at the farm store and just grow them. And yeah.
10-pound lentils I bought last week.
Like those lentils from Timeless Seeds. Exactly.
Timeless Seeds lentils.
So
and I got the farro.
So next week we want to have a little planting media thawed out, our compost in the house. And we don't need a lot of it, of the compost, a couple tablespoons, but we need to take.
I just brought them in. I'm ready. Can't wait till next week. I'm doing. No.
That's what we're going to start. You can pre-moisten that soil about midweek. Make sure it's got.
Oh, really? Okay. I got my bucket sitting next to the stove warming up.
Yep, that would be great. Okay, so this is what we'll be doing quickly. Aren't they cool? I think those were peas.
I don't have those trays.
Yeah, in these particular trays, those other trays are 2 inches deep, and these are 1 inch deep. Now, if I was you guys, I would just buy the 2-inch one because they're multi-purpose. You can use them for lots of things. These 1-inch, I just use less soil, and I'm just going to get them up, harvest them, and then I'm going to turn that soil back and the roots and all back. If I had chickens, that's where they go, out to the chickens. But I'm going to be putting mine right back in the compost and recycling it. So if you have the 2-inch pot trays, you could probably plant 2, maybe 3 times in the same soil before you have to compost it. So don't forget, we are uploading these.
This is what I want to plant next week.
Oh, what do you got? Oh, here, let me get out of this.
Arugula.
Hold on. Okay. Yeah, show it to us, Jackie. What do you got?
Arugula.
Yeah.
I want to plant arugula next week. Can I do that?
Yes, you can. Oh,
Okay.
Look.
That's really what I want. I want that like right away.
Spinach. I have been craving spinach lately, so I'm going to be putting some of that in.
Okay.
All right. So have we got you excited and ready for next week?
Yes.
Yay. That was our goal. And as I look outside, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's snow out there, a little wind. Yeah, it is sunny. But I was so excited the other day. It was a day like this, warm, sunny, or I thought warm, the sun's out, it's got to be warm, and a little bit of wind, a little snow. I go to the passive solar greenhouse. What did I find? My water is froze solid. Like, oh, yep, it's still cabin fever time. I'm going back to the house and reorganize again. So we got to be thinking a little bit about what's going on outside. Go see what that soil's really doing. Yes, and those mustards too. Lori, we can plant those mustards. Yum. What else we got, Jackie? We better get rolling. Did you put a timer on today? I bet you didn't, because I think we went over.
I didn't want to interrupt because you were just talking away and showing your thing, and so I didn't. No, we're way over our time.
Oh, boy.
We want to thank Lori and Jacqueline for signing up as seedlings on Patreon.
Yes, and we highly, highly appreciate that.
I can't believe it, how fast we got people signed up.
Yeah.
Where do they find the Grow Live recordings?
On YouTube for the audio, for the video, but for the audio, we can find that on the Green Organic podcast. There's gardener in that word too. What is it called?
So it's the Green Organic Garden Podcast, but the page is organicgardenerpodcast.com/Patti. And if they go there, they can get the link to the YouTube channel. They can get the link to submit their question, and they can also get the link to the Patreon page. All there. organicgardenerpodcast.com/Patti.
That sounds like that's the place to go. Okay, where are we at, Jackie? I think we should
send us your questions on Facebook.
Yeah, and next Saturday, I think we got a webinar going after the live show. Start at 10 o'clock. We're going to go way deeper into these pests and diseases and give you more confidence. I was on a long webinar the other night across the nation here in the United States that people need confidence. So we're going to give you some next week on a webinar.
It's a paid webinar. It's $37. It comes with a 45-minute full-on presentation followed by a 15-minute question answer. So much more in depth, much more photo. You want to join us live, get your ticket, $37. Can't go wrong with that one.
Yeah, it'll be well worth it because your first attempt at trying to deal with these pests from a product standpoint will cost you more than this webinar. So let's grow.
Yeah, you don't want to deal with it in August. You want preventative before you plant. You don't want to be dealing with it in July and August when the bugs are already. That was my big lesson last year. Lisa Ziegler was laughing at me. She's like, "No, Jackie, you already have the bugs. You have to do this right after you plant, immediately."
Yep. So let's get excited about that next week. We'll help you get this thing
I'm
figured out.
not eating kale or losing my kale to bugs this year. Like I got a lot and I didn't mind the caterpillars because they were crawled off by the time I get up in the morning and I just had their bites. If you're harvesting in the morning, you're going to have those caterpillars. But I harvest in the afternoon, so I just have their bites. But I'm not going to have any bites this year.
Well, get your flower seeds ready. Okay, that's the last teaser. So from here on out, grow healthy.